It seems like each platform rewards different things.
For me, it was always, let me be consistent in making content. And I got consistent in making content. I didn't care about the numbers. All right, gang. Welcome back to Beyond the Pump, where we break down the business of fitness and nutrition. And today we're gonna dive into some social media stuffs. And here's the thing I'm gonna throw out there. First of all, go look at our social media profiles. Neither Andrew nor I are professionals on social media. Like I'm gonna throw that out of the gates here. But it's one of those things where I feel like we always see people on social media after they've solved the problem and they like grew and they have way more followers than we can ever imagine getting. And you don't necessarily get to see and understand and hear the journey that they're kind of taking to get there, the lessons they're learning along the way. What are some of those like quick wins and wins that they're finding and the things that are working? So that way you can go and just start thinking about it differently. And I think this episode is a little bit about that more than anything else. Like, hey, we're not great at it, but we're getting better. And to help you get better, we're going to kind of share the story along the way. So, and Andrew and I, it's funny, we just got off of a call. So we have a bot that we leverage on the back end to just kind of help us with some of the things that we're doing. This is not about the bot, but we've been like hour in already on social media, working on some things. So, Andrew, I would say maybe throwing it your way quick. Like, what things did you get out of this past hour and 15 minute that I've been running this bot now for like 4 or 5 months. Things have been going well. It's been helping me a lot do the things and guarantee the actions that I wish I would manually take. And it's just like, dude, it's just hard to sit there and do that stuff when it's like doesn't feel like you're getting anything in return. I'd rather spend $250 a month and make life easy from that perspective. But you can do it all manually too, right? Like it's not stuff that you have to have a bot for. So the actions and that it's doing is the important thing. So like Andrew, jump in there. What are some of the things you got out of that past hour or so?
Well, I mean, I think backing up for a second, looking at the bigger picture, everyone's gonna have a different philosophy and like way of how they leverage the tool, right? And when I'm referencing the tool, I'm speaking of social media in general. Some people look at it as a creative outlet. Some people look at it from a business outcomes perspective. Some people, it's just a number of different use cases. And so, Steve, I mean, is it fair to say that you use yours more for like a brand awareness and business outcomes type approach?
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
Okay.
It's, there's definitely some personal expression and things like that, but I've learned to like put that into specific spots on social media at this point in time. But for me, it's about how do I go out and grow my network, grow my attention.
Yeah. I have, and we would have kind of contrarian perspectives on social media, or at least maybe different use cases initially. And as we look to continue to grow the brand, there has to be an evolution of that. So to give the listeners an idea, like my perspective on social media is it is a creative outlet, and I do enjoy making these things and talking about specific subjects, which for the people that don't know me very well, you might think that like there's psychology stuff in here, there's physiology stuff in here, there's coaching stuff. Like he talks about his dog on occasion or shows his dog. He talks about his dating life. Like, I don't know. It's kind of hard to encapsulate that for me. And so historically, I haven't leveraged a bot because it is something that I wanted to definitely be a part of and like, more manual intensive, because it was a rewarding outlet for me versus the forever educating. Sorry, I thought Mickey was throwing up. Speaking of dogs. But the forever educating kind of style of information delivery that I like to kind of tinker with. I will say that with the updates and how the algorithm goes and circulating these things, and being at the mercy, so to speak, of what people are seeing, when they're seeing it, how they're scrolling, I think that it's important to point out that there's a lot of reasons why things might not circulate as well, which then may change why people use it. So I am shifting more to a business style thing where obviously I have a skill set, I have a knowledge base. And that's why we just spent an hour going over, the bot that Steve's worked on and perfected and, leveraged it at a very high level these last several months, while I'm a little bit behind the learning curve from a business outcomes perspective. Because traditionally, like if I put it out there, I hope it helps somebody. I don't really care about it either way, but I probably need to start caring about it if we're gonna take this business that we're building to the next several levels, so to speak. So if you are following me, there is going to be a shift in the content that's produced. But I would say out of the last hour, it's really nothing that I would say is groundbreaking. It's definitely a lot of manually. It saves a lot of the manual processes, and I think it does a great job of consolidating lead management with a lot of the more manually intensive things of like making sure you're communicating with people, making sure that, as they're going into your follow stuff, you're sending them like there's just a lot of things that are annoying little things that could be a big deterrent for people that are trying to gain traction from a business outcome perspective, that it just helps alleviate a lot of that. So
Yeah.
that's what I took away from it. It can be very sophisticated. Um, which is also the other thing that I took away, in that if you haven't been in the social media game at all, I think that it could probably be maybe like a good second step. But people that have been in the game might be a little frustrated, looking to grow a little more aggressively. I think that it's a really great tool and a great use for just helping more people get connected to you as a brand and as a business.
Yeah, I would agree.
So,
I mean, and I'm happy you said it. The bot doesn't do anything earth shattering. What
mhm,
it does is it guarantees the things that you should already be doing get done. Like simple and easy, like
volume.
that's what it is. It's
Yeah.
just you're paying a system to make sure the things that you should do are getting done. Because
Mhm.
I know for me,
Mhm.
it's been 2 years of, oh, I got to go do this thing. And guess what didn't happen for 2 years? I didn't go do the things. But I knew I should do them. For me, it was
Mhm.
always let me be consistent in making content. And I got consistent in making content. I didn't care about the numbers. And then eventually the numbers mattered. So I was like, all right, I need to
Mhm.
start doing something different to make it work. So
Mhm. Yeah.
um, social media,
Well,
you can do 100% manual. This very
mhm.
much is not the first step from a bot perspective. And today's episode is very much more about just social media in general. We're only talking
Mhm.
about the bot because we just got off a bot call, but it's not about the bot.
Mm-mm. No. And I will say, like, considering that we have very different audiences, probably from a consumer based perspective, or like their primary interest, as well as the number of people, to give the audience a frame of reference, like, I have about 3,000 ish, give or take, followers for the most part. I believe most of them are organic. And they, I probably grow about like anywhere from 50 to 100 a month in the last 12 months. And so when you consider like Steve sitting at 20,000, there's just a different volume of interaction that probably happens once you get above several thousand. So if you're one of those individuals that you're like underneath the first 100, then I would say, might not be the best thing for you, because you probably should be building a very intimate, close circle. Um, and that would probably be some of the prerequisite stuff before you look at increasing volume, which is effectively what the bot helps you do. Is it helps you not have things slip through the cracks, in my opinion of it. And if you don't have much space to cover, then why would you want to worry about the volume per se? But again, I'm sure there's other things that we could
Yeah, and
have.
it's an unnecessary expense when you're brand new in your business. Like
Yeah.
that's why honestly I wouldn't suggest it to most people out of the gates
Hmm.
to do things. And like you mentioned, one thing I do want to clarify, like you mentioned, you want to be
Yeah.
intimate and things like that. It's not a conversation bot. It doesn't have conversations with people. It's not
Hmm.
something that is taking away from that connection in my mind. It's doing things that you could do manually. But the moment there's any true engagement with somebody, i.e., a conversation, it is up to you to still have that conversation and go down that road. It is very different than something like a many chat, let's say, or some of the automations in a go high
Hmm.
level, where the whole DM me this keyword or comment this on my post, and it sends them things for them to tap and engage with. It is
Mm.
not that.
Can it do that?
It does very different things. So, anyways,
Can it do that real
it
quick?
cannot do that. Nope. It is it,
Okay.
it is
Okay.
not something that replaces conversation. It can respond to certain things in certain ways, but
Okay.
it is not an AI powered kind of, organic like flow chart built tree of if this then that type stuff. It's
Mm.
meant to go out and actually kind of create, it's meant to start a conversation, and once the conversation is started, hand it over to a real human or one of those systems if that's what you're wanting to do.
Got it. Okay. No, that's actually really helpful, because then last question here is, as people are considering, how do they know when they're ready, or how do they know how much they should probably reinvest in the operation side of the house? Do you have a general like expense to profit ratio, or, I'm talking about like how you should probably make this much before you consider investing X amount back in?
I don't think I would worry about spending money on this bot unless you're making at least $3,000 to $4,000 a month, and we're
Okay.
starting to run into some level of resistance of you doing the things you need to do to grow your
Yeah.
social media following. That's when I
Yeah.
would start to make the consideration that this is probably a thing. And that's on the other side that you've already proven you can get some leads and sales and clients out of social media. It should not be
Okay.
your first step toe dip into social media.
Got it. No, that's actually really helpful. I think a lot of people just assume, let me just jump in and start
No, you'll be
dumping
wasting
money
money,
into
and
stuff.
I don't want you to waste money. Keep those profits in your pocket.
So people should not spend $297 on a GHL CRM right out of the gate if they have zero paying clients.
No, don't do that.
I think that's maybe like before you even think about it, you should just pay that fee a couple months, put yourself in a little bit of a hole so that you're really hungry when you get out
Yeah,
there.
no, that's fantastic. You should also go buy a dollar
Motivator.
certification. That's bullshit and give you nothing else too. Like, let's just throw money around so that way we just have less money to work with. 100%.
If you throw a dollar, you might see my face
You
though,
might, you
which
might,
is
you
wild.
might. So, anyways, social media. So, backstory here. Go look at my social media again. Stephen Copshaw on the Instagrams. For a year, I showed up, talking face videos, did my thing, posted consistently, pretty much every day, and 300 views was always the norm. Which I didn't care until I cared, but my only goal was to be consistent because I was never consistent. Like I hated being on social media. But I eventually learned to not hate it, and I eventually learned like, okay, cool. Eventually, I need more views, I need more engagement, I need more things. So I've changed up what I do significantly, like a very big 180. I still do some talking head videos, but now those
Hmm.
videos get 2,000 views. But they get 2,000 views because the other videos that I'm putting out around it are bringing people into my profile, and they're starting to look at some other things. So, for reference, Andrew, you shared that you grow by 50 ish people a month, plus or minus, whatever the case may be recently. My recent growth has been closer to like, I'll expand it out a little bit. I've been growing by like 300 people per month over the past 6 months. And very recently, that's more like 500 people a month. But just averaging it out longer term, I don't want to be like, oh, in the past 45 days, I grew by this, and it's such a small
Hmm.
sample size. And
Hmm.
I made a few key changes, and it was starting to understand or just be willing to play the game of knowing, like, hey, social media, people want to be entertained. And I'm just going to throw this out there. Andrew and I are not necessarily the most entertaining people when we really start talking about our craft. Because, like, when you
That's true.
really love something in depth, like, you just go full nerd mode, glasses on, cape is on, and you just start going down that road. Because, like, we are passionate about people achieving success. Like, that's something that we care
Hmm.
about. And for us, it's not this TikTok dance guise to try to get somebody's attention. It's a putting true information out there in a principled way that has helped us through our careers achieve the success that we have. And we want you to have that information. So it was always just this massive disconnect for me of doing this fake shit, when the reality is like, I just hope this helps one person, and hopefully eventually 100 and 1,000 and 10,000 and so on. I don't know how
Hmm.
you feel about it, Andrew, but like, what are your thoughts on the let me go to do TikTok dances so more people watch my shit? Because I know it was hard for me to be like, it's not me.
I mean, let me just
You
start with
got
this. If I
hair.
could, I
You got a
would.
really good hook.
If I could, I would. What's the? Oh
Your
yeah, the
your
hair.
hair. Your hair is really good.
I mean, listen. At the end of the day, and I think that this is, if I could, I would. If that was my jam, and if I enjoyed doing that, I for sure would. So I'd just like to call that out. And I think at the end of the day, you have to find a way to enjoy the process in order for you to be motivated to participate. If you have 50 other things going on and you don't feel like you're doing well, generally speaking, I think that it's pretty common sense that if you don't feel great and you're overwhelmed, you're not going to do the thing, because what's the return? And social media is inherently something that is a longer term play. Like, you're going to invest probably at least 12 months in understanding how to start to create the content, 12 months, like that's a long time for you to put out 3 videos or 3 clips or 3 pieces of social content a week. I'm talking about 156 different pieces before you even should have an opinion on it. And then I think that, once you do that, you figure out what not to do in the first year. Maybe you then start to figure out what you do enjoy or what you don't enjoy in the second year. And then, like, by the time you're in your third year, which it does seem like most business owners in the coaching space take about 3 years to find their rhythm and find their groove. And it's not, unfortunately, a short-term hack for most people. Now, you can pay for a mentor and they can help you cut that down a little bit, but you're going to be in trial and error mode. And so you want to have just, you want to enjoy the process is what I'm saying. So if I could dance, I would. And,
One day we're gonna have to do it so that way we can have some fun, and eventually somebody might watch it and also laugh.
we're going to have to find some teenagers.
Teach us, teach us.
100%. Is Sophia, she's not on TikTok, right?
She's not.
All right. Well, we got to abduct one of our friends and like have
Let's
them
not
show us what cool
let's
these
talk about
days.
abducting 14-year-olds.
Okay. Well, you know what I mean. Borrowing
Borrow it, yes.
them for their social coolness.
Um,
Snapchat is crazy, actually. And like, looking at the different social platforms, this is something that I think is kind of interesting. In the last, I'd say 18 months, I started to pay attention, and it seems like each platform rewards different things.
oh yeah.
Like TikTok, you don't put a carousel post on TikTok for the most part and expect to gain a lot of attention. Nor do I think that, I mean, I guess Instagram's kind of a wash. What do you find is appropriate on?
So
You're a big Facebook guy, aren't
so
you?
Facebook and Instagram are my two big playgrounds. I'm
Uh,
going to integrate in like TikTok and stuff soon. Um,
mm,
and it was one of those things where like what does work well, and right now on Instagram, B-roll videos that
yeah.
are 5, 7,
Oh,
8 seconds in length
mhm,
are doing really, really well for me. And on Facebook, real conversations around like business and fitness and whatnot, but like asking
mhm,
people questions around some of the like questionable shit in life seems to get the most response from me. Like the other day or last week, I'm in the gym in the morning, 5:30, 6 a.m., and somebody's just slamming the shit out of their weight stack. And it's like, I'm like, bro, like I understand like occasionally like maybe that stack comes down harder, but every single set like you're it's like 14 pounds. Like why do you got to slam that, dude? Like you're not that strong. Like he was literally doing like a tricep extension with like 25 pounds, and I'm just like, you got 2 arms, it's 12 and a half pounds each. Like maybe you got to work on something else. So I asked a question like, is it ever acceptable to slam the weight stack every single set? And of course, you get a lot of response, and it's all kind of tongue in cheek. Like, of course, you got to show everybody how
mm,
jacked you are.
mhm, Well, I mean, there's always like and this is something I've seen here more recently, especially on TikTok, because I prefer TikTok these days, oddly enough, TikTok and Instagram. Um, because it seems like TikTok has more of like a rewarding function, or like it'll circulate your stuff if you have like more real conversation, or like you do the talking head stuff and it's more journal-esque. People kind of like to see behind the scenes, and it seems like that's the stuff that gets circulated more so versus the short kind of like clickbaity type of like 5 seconds. I mean, people are doing like there was a point where people were doing 1 second trends, just 1 second, and then like because to drive up the view count to increase the circulation. And so it's really interesting to see that they do have those different use cases. But um, yeah, when I was thinking about like TikToks, especially, you're finding that now, and I don't know if it's the same on Instagram. I imagine they're going to move to this, but they're starting to reward people for producing better quality content versus like a lot of the stuff where it's I think recently they're penalizing people for doing green screen stuff. I don't know if that's accurate or not. Um, I think that they also kind of like penalize you if you do stitching, or like if you're doing kind of like weird stuff that historically has been part of the brain rot movement, which is like, I guess, an ethical thing for me of I really do try to produce meaningful stuff that I enjoy because it's generally not, something that would rot someone's brain.
Yeah.
Um and so like I would be curious to know what your philosophy is, and like what do you like to produce, and
So
why do you do that?
it's funny, and I'm like, all right, I want to get to some value here, right? Like we're our podcast coach yells at us when we don't provide you guys some value here in like the first 3 to 5 minutes. Here we are, nearly 20 minutes in, and this is gonna be the first real big value thing that I kind of get to drop here. So, but Andrew, you teed that up nicely. Thank you. Um, But to answer your question, I've always struggled with the what do I do, and I don't want to do the dumb shit because I want to give the value stuff and like talk about the thing. But the value stuff is boring, and people don't necessarily.
Mhm.
It's not going to get over circulated because of lower engagement watches and everything. And
Mhm.
it really came down. So 4V framework. If you know me, I like to shove everything into a framework, make it super memorable because it's how I remember the thing. And I needed to start to understand, why am I producing a certain piece of content? So
Mm.
it wasn't that I had to not produce valuable content that gave great information, but I had to realize value content wasn't the thing that was going to drive somebody to my profile. So
Mhm.
I get to be me and talk to you to solve your problem, but that's not necessarily the thing that's going to get over circulated, because like when I'm just giving you something that's you can go and take and run with, I'm not sitting here and call to actions and hooks and all these cool things that everybody tells you to do, because guess what, I just want to be me and give you some value. So what did I create? 4V framework. And step one of 4V, well, hey, views does matter to an extent, and that's going to be viral. Now, for me today, viral is like, how do I get 10,000 views? I'm not up to the million yet. At some point, I will. I'll report back when I get there. But all right, so I got to do some viral ish things that are going to drive up view counts to get more people to come to my profile. They
Mhm.
can align with me, who I am, but it's going to be stuff that maybe I wouldn't traditionally do because it doesn't feel like I'm giving a ton of value. It's probably more so me asking some questions, poking at certain populations of people, and just generally having some fun. So, like, all right, hey, now I understand, in my mind, the goal of this thing or the intent is to produce something that more people will see and drive people to me, not to give
Mhm.
value. So I wrap my brain around that. I've said the word 48 times, so if you guys can't guess what the second V is, then you're not overly paying attention. But the second V is
Victory.
value.
Oh.
So we give them some value. Once they're there, we want them, like, I want you to learn something. And through that learning, maybe you'll follow me. Like, cool, amazing. Hopefully you got something out of it. If you didn't, that's also totally cool too. You might just not be my person. I might not be your person. The third thing is going to be voice, right? So now we need to include stuff that's who we are, right? So having your dogs, having things about your dating life, how do we transition it to somebody can like learn about you and connect with you? Because you think of some of these big people that we've never met in person, but like we idolize them. It's because we have this connection with them through podcasts, through pictures, through social media, through movies, through music, whatever it might be. Well, that's how we start to create some of that connection. And then that fourth V is going to be validation. So, like, what are the actual core tangible items? What are the outcomes that you create, right? I'm talking about my 4V framework. A really good post for me, that's a validation post, would literally be putting my 4V framework on my profile, pinned or highlighted. So that way, when you go there, it's like, oh, this is super useful stuff. Like, it validates the fact that he knows what he's talking about.
Mhm.
So, that all of a sudden kind of put into buckets. Why am I producing certain content? And now all of a sudden I was able to say, all right, you know what? I'm totally cool dropping some like knowledge bomb on, my thought process around the tariffs and why people are freaking out about losing some money, and repel some people. And I got some nasty messages, and also pull some people closer to me. And it's like, if you don't align with my beliefs, then we're probably not going to be able to work together anyways. So let me just get you out of the way earlier, but also let me pull the right people in closer quicker. And now you come to my profile. Okay, you said some kind of weird shit, but I find value in the other thing. Sure, let me follow. And, all that to say, I like giving value, but I had to figure out those other buckets. So I was willing to show up and do the thing that I had to do so I could get more people to see the value. And that was the big change
Mhm.
for me that happened about, 8 weeks ago, I'll say.
When you think about the nature of, again, how you construct your social presence, and we're talking about a brand footprint. If you're looking at it from a business perspective, what are your brand values? What do you guys do? Do you have social proof for that? Like, those would be appropriate buckets to fill, which is effectively what we're talking about in like the 4V framework, is like, what are your content buckets and what's the intent behind them? And when you think about social media strategy versus like engagement, and if you do go down the route of like hiring someone, what we're trying to identify is like, what's that person's role and responsibility. thinking about where things go inside of your plan is more strategy based, and like taking the video, editing it, and posting it, that's more of like a managerial type of thing. And so, the 4V framework fits very well as a strategy basis of like, well, are you trying to build your audience this month or this week? And then are you next week trying to take that? It's kind of like bulking and cutting in a lot of ways of like, you might eat junk calories, right? Just to get some calories in there and gain weight and add muscle tissue. But then you, after a certain period of time, start to try to whittle some of that that fat mass down and keep the lean body mass. And so there's always this expansion, contraction, like the way that your lungs expand when you breathe in, they contract when you breathe out. It's kind of the same process. So you're like, oh God, I think he's having a fucking heart attack, guys. You seeing it live right now. um, but yeah, so like that's where I kind of just keeping a big picture for a second of what are you doing? Why are you doing it? And I think that those are really big reasons for you to tie into as a way of not being discouraged with if it doesn't go that way. At the end of the day, you're not posting to post. You're not posting to like magically get to from 0 to 1 million followers. You're doing it in service of something. And that requires maybe, if you're trying to get ready for a diet and you want to lose a lot of body fat, maybe you should add some lean body mass before you go into your diet, knowing you're going to lose some of that muscle tissue and that deficit. And so they're just like precursors to that. Virality and like, value might be a huge component of that. And then eventually you try to drive people to your profile to see that stuff. And that's where you just want to think about it from a little bit big picture perspective versus really getting sucked in, which I think a lot of people tend to do immediately, because as soon as they click the post button, if they're brave enough to even click the post button, because frankly, there's a lot of people that don't even get that far.
Yeah.
Um,
That was always my
and
big
just
issue.
what's
That was
that?
always my issue. I'm like, oh, something's off about it. I look like an idiot. Some version thereof. Let me not post it.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, it's weird too, because when you think about how content used to be, like, I first started posting in 2010, 2011, somewhere around there. And a lot of my original content was just fitness based. And, I probably came in and probably had like 1,500 followers back before social media was like really a huge growth engine for most people. And, like these days, it's not quite the same when I post things that I'm like, oh, hey, listen, like I'm doing this for my training right now. And people seem like they kind of gravitate towards that from that core group, versus the talking head videos, which I seem to get less traction on. Although I did have one that went viral for my brand footprint. It was like a 4.5 minute thing on attachment styles, and it was on my TikTok. So, for whatever reason, I think that people will just gravitate towards different things. So, and it changes every year, as your philosophy probably should as well. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And
that's
it's,
my opinion on
I think so. You got the 4V framework, you got the intent behind it.
that.
And I want the message to be heard. Like, understand what the intent or the outcome that a post is, not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily figure out how to fill all four of those buckets, right? Be you
Oh,
within reason and do different things to try to attract or create different outcomes. And the first outcome is you
mm-hmm.
want to give people some value when they do come see you. And then the second thing is probably getting people to come see your profile. So what are
Mm-hmm.
those things? Worry about voice, worry about validation down the road. The other thing is consistency is key. But every asshole on the internet says be consistent. So what does that actually mean? And here's what I'll say. Consistency in my mind means showing up every single week for the first month and posting two times a week. Then the second month is going to be posting 3 times a week. And then the fourth month is going to be, or third month will be 4 times a week, and then so on down the road, right? So that to me is consistency. But consistency in my mind is also increasing volume along the way. Here's the way you're going to do that. And the reason I say first month 2 posts a week, not first month 1 post a week, is you're going to go back and you're going to look at your top 2 performing posts or your top 25% of posts. And performance out of the gates, I'm going to tell you, should be gauged based upon views, not comments, not likes, not anything else, just how many people saw it. Go look at those and then recreate those into one, another reel, two, a like tweet style post, like that little picture, your name, and then just the words. Three, a carousel. and then 4 some type of kind of other conversation spin-off topic of that. So if you post 8 times in month 1 and you take 2 of those posts and you now spin off 4 things from those 2 posts, you now have 8 posts to post next month, which is effectively twice a week right there of just recreations of something you already did. You only need to think of 1 new post per week to go out and do.
Mhm.
So with
Mhm.
actually doing less work than the first month where you had to think of 8 things twice a week for 4 weeks, you now need to think of 1 thing a week for 4 weeks plus the recreation, and you're now up to 3 a week. And you simply repeat that process.
Mhm.
Next month, you're going to basically create variations of your top 3. The following month, recreate variations of your top 4, 5, 6, and so on. And over time, all of a sudden, you're having to create 1 or 2 new per week, but you're using some of the recycled recreations for the other multiple times per week. And now volume is going way up without you actually having to do more, call it creative work. You might just have to do a little bit of editing and repurposing work. And before you get there, one thing I'll show you is they did a study online, and I read it on TikTok, so I know it's 100% true. No, I actually read it on a blog from a social media company. So I have no idea how true it really is, but it does make sense. It actually does make
Okay.
sense that they say, whoever they are, only 5% of your followers see a post when you put it out there. For me, 5% of people is roughly 1,000 people total at this point in time, right? So when I think of that, all right, well, if a post gets 1,000 views, let's say 2,000 views, that's 10% for me. If you know 5 to 10% of your people see a post, in theory, you could post that 10 to 20 times before your entire following will actually see it. So the reason we repurpose some of the winning content is because A, data told us that's the best stuff to go and keep doing. And B, the likelihood that the same person is going to see it twice until you post it 21 times is super small. So you might as well just keep doing some of the same things and learning and not adding more work for yourself, because that's one of the things that always causes pain for us.
Mhm.
I have 20,000 followers. I'm getting 1,500 to 2,000 views per reel. That's 5 to 10% of my people. I can post it 10 times before everybody sees it twice. So just throwing that out there is that multiplication
Yeah.
strategy. And what I mean by consistency and repurposing and whatnot. Again, knowing me, I have a coined term for this called the echo effect on social media. But
Guys, so you can go follow Steve at the Framework Master, where he has an acronym for everything you could think of. If you want to learn how to drain your pool for a winter and winterize your pool, he has a framework for that. If you want to know how to grow your business, he has a framework for that. It's called the Freedom Framework.
just
If you have social media, he has the 4V. What else do you have? You actually do have a fuck ton
I
of.
do.
There's going to be different social content, but I will say that to kind of wrap this up, for me, it's when you start posting this stuff, your KPIs, your key performance indicators, the things that you can actually measure are going to probably be views, likes, comments, shares, and saves. There's 5 things, right? And there's something that you can figure out or use as a diagnostic criteria to understand where you might be lacking or where you can improve your content creation process. If you get low views, your first 3 seconds probably isn't very engaging for people to want to stick around and watch the video. Um, if you have low likes, it means that your stuff probably isn't necessarily something that's super valuable. If it's low with shares, it's not the most relatable, meaning like people are like, haha, I had the same dating experience. Let me share that with someone that's also had this weird dating experience. And it creates a lot of that, which actually is probably one of the biggest litmuses for whether they want to circulate your stuff is a lot of shares these days. So that's
Shares
probably one of
is
the
the
more valuable.
most valuable metric that you can get today,
Hmm.
at least on Instagram and TikTok. I
Yeah.
believe those are the biggest ones on each
Hmm.
platform, I think.
Yeah. And that's just today. Like, next week it might change. It does change very frequently, which is why you have to be able to adapt. If you get rigid in something and you're going to get frustrated, but the last thing is saves, and saves are things that are helpful. And so if you are trying to create something going back to the 4V framework and you're trying to go viral, but you don't get shit for views, then you might want to maybe work on your hook and figure out how to create a really captivating first 3 seconds that pulls people in. And there's a lot of gimmicky ways to do that. I feel like the hook's generally pretty gimmicky, but it is something that you're going to have to do if you want to increase that. If you want to make it more relatable, you probably want to make it more, more personable, stuff like that. So, more tips oriented if you want more saves. And so that's where you can kind of play around with it. And, if you notice one of those dips and that's what you were trying to improve that month, then you want to look at your content and, um, again, just kind of think through it a little bit. At the end of the day, and I will say this, you have to take time to assess and think. A lot of people think like I'm automatically going to know what to do, and then when they don't know what to do, they want to throw their hands up and like, I guess I'll quit. No, it's a problem to be solved, not a problem to be avoided. Which that avoidance tends to compound things. So those are just some of my closing thoughts. Steve, what about
No, I
you?
think that's great. I think highlighting what each of those KPIs means really is a good close to this. Out of the gates,
Mm-hmm.
look for views. Once you get the views
Mm-hmm.
down, now start to look for some engagement. I think the easiest one and the most helpful one is going to be likes. What does that look like? But then after that, it is how
Mm-hmm.
do we get people to save it and share it so that way we start
Mm-hmm.
understanding kind of what that looks like. So I don't really have anything else to
Mm-hmm.
add. Otherwise, the my thing would be onwards and upwards. Go start doing the social media thing. Think about why you're doing that post, what's going on. Be you, be authentic, and it's something that will only help from there. So, but otherwise, gang, we appreciate you joining us for today's episode at Beyond the Pump, where we break down the business of fitness and nutrition. Until next time, gang, make sure you like this episode, you've subscribed to us, and if you want us to break down any topics, go ahead and throw that down below so we can investigate it and bring you the latest and greatest news slash, Andrew and Steve's opinions on these topics. Until next time, gang, peace.